So I've been playing Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles: The Crystal Bearers. Now, Square Shaft is a company known for many things. But one thing they've been mocked for a lot recently is naming conventions. And while I don't particularly mind odd Japanese names, by the time a non-beta game with 2.8 in the title exists, you may have a little bit of a problem. And even if that isn't the case, I'm pretty sure you've reached critical fucking mass by the time one of your many spin-off series spawns its own fucking spin-off. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles: The Crystal Bearers, yes, those are 2 subtitles, is exactly that. You see, the Crystal Chronicles series was made as an alternative to the mainline Final Fantasy games. Instead of long cutscenes and a plot-heavy focus, the games featured little to no story at all, and instead it focused on Zelda-esque dungeon crawling and, most importantly of all, multiplayer. And you know what this series needs? Long cutscenes, a story, and a fun and varied cast of characters. And you know what this series doesn't need? Multiplayer.
But then, how does it even still fit under the Crystal Chronicles banner? Surely it should be its own spin-off.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea, Governor.
But I meant a spin-off on its own though, not a Crystal Chronicles spin-off. That wouldn't make any sense.
I can't hear you.
No, wait, you can't do this. No.
The story of Final Fantasy Crystal Something Something stars a bunch of chicks bumping butts at the beach. And also something about this dude called Lael doing some magic or something, and some stuff about restoring the balance of the world. And of course, totally obvious militant bad guy turns out to be the totally obvious militant bad guy. The story is actually pretty good though. The first thing I noticed was how seemingly terrible the voice acting was, which I deemed as rather odd considering how this wasn't really that much of an issue anymore at the time, and it's not so much due to the voice actors themselves.
No worries, I needed to ask you something anyway, Sid. Or should I say Professor Sid, Chief Engineer of Lilty and Crystal Reactor Developer.
Okay, maybe they're quite bad too, but it's mostly just due to the writing being quite exceptionally bad. And I don't mean that in the usual confusing Final Fantasy way. No, the manner in which the dialogue is constructed just doesn't feel as if it's done by actual writers, leading me to believe that the localization team was probably a bit fuck. It's not a huge detriment in any way though, or well, at least not to me. The characters and the game's overall personality still shine through enough, all of which I will get to later. But it does kind of feel like wasted potential considering what they have going on here and how much cutscenes the game actually has. Anyway, Lael has been imbued with the power of the crystals or some bullshit like that. And instead of that allowing him to fly or have this really big cool sword or whatever, he can pick up and throw things. Yeah, no joke, that's straight up what he does. And not only that, but there aren't even any ham-fisted RPG mechanics to go with it. This is, for all intents and purposes, an action-adventure game. Even though that doesn't mean fucking shit, because so are Watch Dogs and The Legend of Zelda, despite both of them not having a single fucking thing in common besides iconic hats. The Crystal Ballers, on the other hand, does actually have quite a lot in common with said Legend of Zelda. So no leveling or complex RPG systems, but instead this sort of sandboxy-like world that's actually just a bunch of towns and dungeons, connected through loading screens, and all of the combat takes place in real time. There really isn't an incredible amount of shit here in the way of actual gameplay. Picture, if you will, the just now mentioned Legend of Zelda, only then remove all of the sword fighting, the inventory, and also the dungeons. After which, all you're really left with is just a bunch of cool looking locations where you can talk to people and play around with pots and chickens. Well, that's exactly what this game is. It's a very casual experience, I guess. Which is fitting considering the console that it was released on, and I'd be lying if I said that it bothered me at all. But don't go in expecting any real type of challenge or actual RPG mechanics or anything like that. Though you do end up getting some equipment. Oh, mysterious. Basically, you'll find a bunch of miscellaneous crap scattered throughout the world like nuts and tongues. Yeah, I don't know either. And you're able to use said crap at stores to craft things like rings, amulets, and earrings to raise shit like your defense or the range of your grabby, throwy, pointy powers. And that's it. All of the game's mechanics and systems, if you can even really call them that, are very simple and straightforward. And while it was kind of, sort of, almost rewarding to forge your own equipment from the gunk you've gathered, it is almost patronizingly simple as you can't really choose the components yourself. Imagine going to a restaurant where they'll still cook the food for you as they normally would, but you need to bring all of the ingredients. Shit's weird. Anyway, as for the quote-unquote combat, you need to lock onto enemies or objects by pointing at them and holding the B trigger. And then, once the little circle bar thingy fills up, you can pick them up, throw them away, shake them about a little, or just smash them into the ground to cause immediate damage. So, it's not a very Wii-heavy game by any means. Being that, as far as things like the menus and walking go, shit remains fairly traditional. It's really only during the picking up shit part where you'll have to use the motion controls, which is mostly fine. In fact, I prefer it over to having to control the camera with the Wiimote like what Fragile Dreams did, but it does make it so that the controls took a fair whack of getting used to. Thing is that having to turn the camera with the D-pad and worrying about pointing at stuff at the same time is rather fucking unwieldy at first. Not awful by any means, but it slows down the controls considerably, and thus the game has actually been slowed down to make up for it. The fighting, the platforming, the general dicking around town, all of it's very easygoing and not challenging in any way. It even seems as if the devs started avoiding and or cutting out certain scenarios because of the fiddly controls. I mean, there's a ton of moments where it'll look like it's leading up to a boss battle or something that's exciting from a gameplay standpoint, only for it to play out during a cutscene. And once the first actual boss fight did happen, I instantly realized why. As the game made me throw sticks at a fucking behemoth because that's all Lyle can do. And even then, maybe that could have been sort of okay good if this was still really cool somehow. But the combat just isn't contextually satisfying at all. Like, I appreciate that they at least tried something different with this, but pointing and waving at enemies just isn't all that fun to do. I don't know. It feels like they just stopped giving a shit about the motion controls halfway through development and just said, "Fuck it, let's make an adventure game." And as an adventure game, it's actually kinda great, but once again the word casual does come to mind. Still though, I did get used to the controls after the first couple of hours, and it never really became a point of frustration either. And even if I never would have been able to get used to it, I'm not too sure it really would have mattered anyway, as I quite quickly realized that most of the combat is completely optional. Yeah, there are only about 4 or 5 mandatory battles, and I had no problems whatsoever with the last couple, even after having skipped most of the fights in the field. This isn't an RPG, so there isn't too much of a reason to fight other than the enemies being around kinda tainting the view. But even then, the enemy miasma spawning gates of doom are timed and will close after a while anyway. So there isn't really any incentive to fight enemies other than it getting you MacGuffins to be able to make new equipment, but if you aren't going to find any monsters anyway, you won't be needing any new equipment either. So, to keep the game from becoming nothing but walking from cutscene to cutscene, they added a shit ton of mini-games. These'll happen whenever other Final Fantasy games would have likely resorted to FMVs. So when you have to sneak around a train for instance, or when doing the dance at a fancy ball. And while these don't exactly control great, the rhythmless dancing in particular was rather shitty, they don't really punish you at all for fucking shit up. So, what could have been this huge glaring issue and cause of frustration is instead just kinda meh. I really wasn't lying when I said that this is a casual game. Similar to Kirby's Epic Yarn and other Wii games like it, you just kinda play it to relax. And honestly, I'm pretty okay with this, as the game does have a fucking buttload of charm. Now, I know, reviewer buzzwords, blah blah blah, whatever, I don't care. If there was one reason I'd recommend anyone pick this up, it'd really have to be just how fucking cute the game actually is. First off, all the NPCs are really fucking stupid, and it's pretty darn great. Every city is in a state of total fucking anarchy, with everyone going around fighting each other, bumping into each other, breaking shit, fucking wheels of cheese exploding, rolling down a mountain, and wild beasts assaulting local farmers. It's quite funny. And while maybe not completely intentional, it does add heaps upon heaps of personality. Then there's also just the arts and all of the little details that went into the design of the very large variety of areas that you visit. It really did feel like I was going on some epic Zelda-style adventure when taking the air trains through the big city, while being in awe of the autumnal forests. Or when butt-bumping butts at the beach, I was never not impressed with this game's world. And this world in question actually has some fun fucking characters for once as well. No brooding emo douchebags or whiny babies to be found here. Not that I really mind either of those, but Jesus fuck did I not know how much I wanted fun fucking characters in a Final Fantasy game. Lael is a suave, wisecracking mad cunt, and Belle is a thief and a wisecracking... and Kais is an army boy and a wisecracking... Okay, I'm beginning to see a pattern here. And that pattern is that all of the characters are pretty much Zidane from Final Fantasy IX. They do all have drastically different roles though, but in the end everyone's just trying to out-wise guy each other. Which I'm honestly fine with, as I said, people having fun is really something this series needs every once in a while. I mean, you're going on an adventure, so you better fucking enjoy it. So yeah, the game is actually kind of alright, despite also maybe not really being much of a video game at all. It's a lot like a slightly more awkward and lower budget Final Fantasy IX in its presentation and attitude, and it's quite funny both intentionally and unintentionally. And as a result, I actually found myself liking it quite a fucking lot. Though I am well aware that my biases as a Final Fantasy fan may very well have something to do with that. But considering I avoided this game for quite a while because I thought it looked stupid, I was pleasantly surprised by how fucking stupid it actually was. The story doesn't really go anywhere or do incredibly wild things, nor does the gameplay really do, well, anything. But as a fun casual adventure with an okay cast of characters and a nice little world to explore, it's pretty fucking good. It's a game that didn't really set out to do much of anything, and it succeeds in that almost perfectly. But either way, I liked parts of it. 10 out of 10.